running back is the most important position in fantasy football. Chances are the first few rounds of your draft will be full of RBs. Some of those guys will probably be busts, while other guys will probably be the highest scoring players in the entire league. Today, I'm going to go over my top 15 running backs for the 2019 fantasy football season and explain my reasoning. Hopefully, I can help some of you secure those valuable workhorse RBs and dominate your leagues this year. No fluff, only facts. Let's get right into it. Starting off my top tier of running backs is Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke is a guy who led the league in rushing yards in 2 of his 3 NFL seasons to date, 2018 and 2016, and was also on pace to lead the league in rushing in 2017 if not for his suspension. It should come as no surprise to anybody that Zeke is the current betting favorite to lead the league in rushing again in 2019. Maybe running behind the second best offensive line in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus would help. As if that wasn't enough, Zeke's receiving numbers have also been stellar since the Cowboys got Amari Cooper, with 6.5 receptions and 49 receiving yards per game. That would give him 104 catches and 784 receiving yards if applied to a 16-game season. In fact, even Zeke's rushing numbers were better when Amari Cooper came to Dallas. He went from 88.4 to 102 rushing yards per game. Bake in some positive touchdown regression because Zeke had an outlier season in terms of rushing TDs in 2018, only 0.4 per game as opposed to his 1 per game in 2016 and 0.7 per game in 2017, and you would have yourself the safest RB in fantasy football. Well, the safest when he's on the field. Zeke may hold out of training camp if he doesn't get the contract he's looking for. This ranking is assuming he plays the full season. Zeke's situation is definitely one that needs to be monitored before making a decision on draft day. If he ends up missing playing time, he would not be my number 1 pick. It would be this next guy, Saquon Barkley. Now, we all know how bad the Giants were last year. The fact that Saquon Barkley was the number 1 running back in 2018 fantasy football and PPR scoring with that heaping pile of garbage surrounding him as a rookie is enough to justify taking him this high. Saquon definitely deserves consideration for the first overall pick. I only prefer Zeke because I feel like he has a higher floor in terms of production, but that's mainly because Zeke is in a better offensive situation. Anyway, we all know how good Saquon Barkley is. No need to ramble. Next up is Alvin Kamara. When I found out that Mark Ingram was leaving the Saints, I was getting ready to put Kamara at the top of my ranks. I mean, last year when Ingram was suspended for the first 4 games of the season, Kamara was the top RB in fantasy with a ridiculous 34 points per game. To put that into perspective, Todd Gurley's 26.6 points per game were number 1 for the 2018 season. That would have made Alvin Kamara 7.4 per game better than Todd Gurley in 2018. It was really looking like Kamara's year to take the NFL by storm. Then I found out that Latavius Murray joined the Saints to replace Ingram, and I pumped the brakes a little bit. It remains to be seen how much the Saints plan on using Murray, but his 7.5 touches per game when Dalvin Cook also played is significantly lower than Ingram's 13.3 touches per game in 2018. Kamara has proven himself to be an elite fantasy option in his 2 seasons in the NFL, finishing as the number 4 running back in 2018 and the number 3 running back in 2017 in PPR scoring. Kamara is a no-brainer in the top 4 and deserves consideration for the number 1 overall pick. Last up in Tier 1 is Christian McCaffrey. Now, I've said that all of the top 3 guys have an argument for first pick. Well, McCaffrey also makes a case for top pick in 2019. Tier 1 is essentially the 4 RBs that are worth the first overall pick in 2019. Once you get this high, distinguishing between them just comes down to nitpicking. Anyway, Christian McCaffrey is coming off a sophomore year in which he was the number 2 running back in fantasy football in PPR scoring. Christian McCaffrey is easily one of the safest RBs in fantasy due to his presence as a pass catcher. He was the number 1 RB in targets, receptions, and receiving yards in 2018. This all came on a down year for the Panthers, who were 7-9 on the season while Cam Newton struggled with shoulder issues down the stretch. Rather than continuing to talk about how good we already know Christian McCaffrey is, I want to move on and discuss the rest of the RBs on this list because I don't want to waste anybody's time. Starting off the next tier is Melvin Gordon. Similar to Zeke, Melvin Gordon has another contract situation to monitor. However, I don't want to jump to any conclusions before the outcome, so I'm ranking him as if he plays for the Chargers in 2019. This ranking is obviously subject to change if Melvin Gordon is not suiting up for the Chargers this season. Anyway, let's talk about what makes Melvin Gordon so great. We're looking at a guy who, in PPR scoring, was the number 8 RB in 2018, the number 5 RB in 2017, and the number 7 RB in 2016. When it comes to touchdowns, Melvin Gordon knows a thing or two. Since the start of the 2016 season, Todd Gurley is the only running back with more TDs from scrimmage than Melvin Gordon. In fact, from 2016 to the start of the 2018 season, Melvin Gordon has more touchdowns from scrimmage than any other player in the NFL. The only thing holding me back from putting Melvin Gordon in my top tier is his injury history, which unfortunately includes knee and hip injuries throughout his young career. If Melvin Gordon were a guarantee to play the whole season healthy with the Chargers' high-powered offense, he would absolutely find himself higher on these rankings. Unfortunately, there's too much risk involved with Gordon to consider taking him first overall. If you end up drafting Melvin Gordon in 2019, please do yourself a favor and also draft Austin Eckler. The other running back in this tier is none other than David Johnson. Look, I get it. David Johnson was a disappointment last season. But if being the number 9 RB in fantasy football while playing for one of the worst teams in the league is DJ's floor, then there's still hope that his ceiling is elite RB1 territory. The Cardinals are looking to be a significantly improved team in 2019, bringing in Kyler Murray at quarterback and offensive-minded Cliff Kingsbury at head coach to revamp the system altogether. A return to DJ's 2016 season as the number 1 RB in fantasy football isn't guaranteed by any means. If it were, I'd have DJ higher on this list. However, it seems like David Johnson will have a better season in 2019 as the team around him is also better. Now, this next tier has 4 running backs in it. First up is Damien Williams. I talked about Damien Williams in my last video about 3 RBs who can win you your league, so I'll quickly summarize why I have Damien Williams so high in my rankings. Last year, from Week 14 to the AFC Championship game, Damien Williams had the starting job in the Kansas City backfield. In that 6-game span, he averaged 24.4 fantasy points per game, which would have made him the number 2 RB in fantasy football on a per-game basis. Not impressed yet? Okay, well let me make one thing clear. There is no committee in Kansas City. Both head coach Andy Reid and offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy have come out and said that Damien Williams is the full-time starting running back, and they have expressed confidence in Williams' ability to carry a significant workload. Since Andy Reid became the Chiefs' head coach in 2013, Kansas City running backs have been top 4 in fantasy points scored. If the 6-game sample size that I mentioned earlier wasn't good enough for you, there's a 6-year sample size of dominance. Damien Williams is going to be a star in 2019, and at the end of the season, people are going to wonder why they were so low on him. Moving on, my number 8 RB is a guy that I also talked about in my last video about league-winning running backs, Dalvin Cook. Last season, Cook was the number 7 RB in fantasy from Week 12 to 17. Latavius Murray was still on the team at this time, but now that Murray is on the Saints, his 140 carries, 26 targets, 719 all-purpose yards, and 6 touchdowns are out of Minnesota. More importantly, Murray's 7.5 touches per game when Cook also played in 2018 are a thing of the past. This, combined with the fact that third-round draft pick Alexander Mattison was the only RB added by the Vikings, shows that Minnesota is committing to Dalvin Cook as their workhorse running back. Like I said in my last video, the training wheels are coming off of Dalvin Cook. He finished last season completely healthy and has had over a year and a half to fully recover since his ACL tear. Cook's hamstring injury from last season is also nothing to worry about, as hamstring strength is weakened by about 40% shortly after an ACL tear. Enough time has elapsed for Cook to fully heal and be better than ever before. Now that the Vikings are looking to run the ball more with Gary Kubiak, Dalvin Cook is a huge bounce-back candidate in 2019. Number 9 on this list is Joe Mixon. Right off the bat, I want to mention that Joe Mixon was a top 10 RB last year, despite the fact that he missed 2 games and the Bengals' offense was not great by any means. Now, with Marvin Lewis gone, new head coach Zach Taylor has been quoted saying that the Bengals will use the Rams' offense as a starting point for their own playbook, as that's where Taylor worked last as an assistant coach. This is the same Rams offense that fed Todd Gurley the ball play after play and resulted in him being the clear-cut top RB before his injury. I would put Mixon higher, but I'm a bit concerned by his injury history and the fact that the Bengals added some depth at running back behind him. Rounding out the top 10 in this tier of running backs is Le'Veon Bell. Now, Le'Veon Bell's resume is one that speaks for itself. He's been among the top RBs in fantasy football since 2014, but injuries and off-the-field issues have gotten the best of him over that period of time, as 2014 was Bell's only season playing the full 16 games. Now, after taking last season off, he finds himself on the New York Jets to begin a new chapter of his career. I won't use the fact that Bell missed an entire season to determine his rank, as that can be skewed in either a positive or negative light depending on how you look at it. I've seen some people say that Bell will be rested and ready to go as a justification for ranking him higher, and others have said that he might be rusty and unprepared as a justification for ranking him lower. Since neither one of these perspectives is more valid than the other, I won't be taking either into account. The reason why I put Bell so low comes down to one person, Adam Gase. As head coach of the Jets, Adam Gase controls Le'Veon Bell's fate in fantasy football, no matter how talented Bell is. Gase has historically decimated his own running backs in fantasy football. In all 6 of his seasons being either head coach or offensive coordinator, his RBs have been 19th or worse in target share. Combined with the fact that the Dolphins were dead last in offensive snaps per game in Gase's 3 seasons there, I'm not too excited about Le'Veon Bell in 2019. 2 of Bell's biggest strengths have always been his pass catching and his ability to handle a significant workload. Unfortunately, through no fault of his own, those 2 strengths might be suppressed in New York. Now this last tier has the final 5 running backs on this list. Coming in at number 11 is James Conner. It might come as a surprise to some that Conner isn't in my top 10, and I'm aware of how great Conner was last year. He was the number 6 RB with just 13 games played. The Steelers' RB is always a valuable asset in fantasy football. That hasn't necessarily changed, but what has changed this year is that there are 2 Steelers' RBs that are valuable assets now, James Conner and Jalen Samuels. Conner will be the early down bruiser and will probably get more work than Samuels, but Samuels' role in the offense can't be ignored. Conner himself was quoted saying that work will be spread out pretty evenly between himself and Samuels. It seems like Jalen Samuels will get a significant portion of the passing work, which was also seen in Week 17 when Conner only had 3 catches on 3 targets for 30 yards, while Samuels had 7 catches on 8 targets for 40 yards. This makes sense when you consider the fact that Samuels is a former tight end, so pass catching is definitely a strong part of his game. All things considered, I still believe that James Conner will be an RB1 in 2019. However, Jalen Samuels' presence limits Conner's upside, especially in the passing game. Number 12 on this list is Nick Chubb. From Week 7 to the end of the season, Nick Chubb held the starting job in the Cleveland backfield. In that span, he was the number 8 RB in fantasy football. Chubb was able to handle 80% of the team's carries, all while staying in the top 10 in yards per carry and in yards after first contact. A running back as good as Nick Chubb should not be this low, especially when you consider the fact that the Browns' offense has gotten even better with the addition of Odell Beckham Jr. and another year of experience for the entire team. But it's hard to ignore the Browns adding Kareem Hunt. It's true that Hunt is serving an 8-game suspension, so he won't be able to play until Week 10, but there is a serious possibility that Kareem Hunt can steal valuable touches from Nick Chubb down the stretch in 2019. If you draft Chubb this season, I suggest also getting Kareem Hunt just as a safety net. From Week 1 to 9, though, Nick Chubb is poised to excel as a workhorse in Cleveland. Coming in at number 13, I've got Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette is such a hard player to rank because his ceiling is sky high, but his floor is rock bottom. We all know about the injuries that have plagued him throughout his career. We also know about how dominant he is when he's on the field. One example of that is Fournette's rookie season in 2017, when he was the number 9 running back in fantasy and was the number 7 running back on a per-game basis despite missing 3 games. Injuries haven't been the only thing holding Fournette back, though. Facing stacked boxes has been an every-week occurrence for him so far in his young career. However, now that Nick Foles is on the Jaguars, teams will need to respect Jacksonville's passing attack, so Fournette won't have to deal with as many stacked boxes. I would really love to rank Fournette higher because of the sky-high potential, especially with the Jaguars' revamped offense, but his injury history just can't be ignored. Fournette has missed 11 games and has had others cut short in just 2 seasons in the NFL. Unfortunately, there is too much risk for me to be higher on Leonard Fournette in 2019. Number 14 on this list is Aaron Jones. Jones is another guy I desperately want to rank higher because I know his potential, but he has never truly had an extended chance to shine as a starting running back. Both injuries and not getting the bulk of the team's touches have been roadblocks in Jones' young career so far. However, in the 11 games when Jones wasn't injured last year, he was the number 13 RB in fantasy football. Hopefully Jones can keep his injuries in the past as he reduced his body fat by over 11% this offseason and gained muscle to stay at his playing weight of 205 pounds. If the Packers end up riding Aaron Jones as their workhorse RB, my rank of 14 might be too low. However, all of the evidence suggests that the Packers will use more of a committee approach in 2019, as new head coach Matt LaFleur has been emphasizing that he wants a mix at running back. Jones is still the favorite to lead the backfield, though, so he's earned himself a spot inside the top 15. And finally, my number 15 running back in 2019 fantasy football is none other than Todd Gurley. We all know how dominant Todd Gurley has been these past 2 seasons in fantasy football, and if not for injuries, he'd probably be at the top of this list. However, his arthritic component in his knee is something that I can't ignore. There's absolutely no way Gurley gets the usage that he had over the past 2 years. The Rams are paying Gurley $60 million, so it'd be wise not to run him into the ground. Well, unless they want him to be completely burnt out in the playoffs again, like he was last season. Gurley had just 4 carries for 10 yards and a TD in the NFC Championship game, and 10 carries for 35 yards in the Super Bowl. In both games combined, Gurley had a measly 2 catches for just 2 receiving yards. Those numbers shouldn't even be in the same sentence as Todd Gurley, but it's the harsh reality. The Rams aren't going to give Gurley the same volume as before, and Gurley's production probably won't be up to par with his past 2 seasons. A decline in workload and efficiency, combined with the very real possibility of re-injury, is enough to scare me away from drafting Todd Gurley in the first 2 rounds. It's much easier to lose a draft in the first few rounds than it is to win it. And if you spend an early pick on Todd Gurley in 2019, then you're spending a top pick on a player who might not even be on the field for you. Well, there you have it, everybody. Those are my top 15 running backs for the 2019 fantasy football season. Please like the video if you enjoyed it or learned something. It would really mean the world to me. I did a lot of research for this video. If you have any questions or want to see me cover another position next, be sure to comment down below and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and be sure to have yourself a good one.